Sentences. Lesson 4. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to write better complex sentences using before, after, when, and as soon as.
Let's look at the lesson outline for lesson 4. First, we will look at the sentence types. Simple, compound, and complex. We're going to compare them. And number 2, we will look at complex sentences in more detail. Number 3, I will introduce you to subordinate conjunctions. We've talked a lot about coordinating conjunctions, the fanboys, but now it's time to look at the subordinate conjunctions. Number 4, we will make some complex sentences using before and after. Number 5, we will make more complex sentences, this time using when and as soon as. Number 6, we have to look at what's strange about before, after, when, as soon as. There's something strange about these conjunctions. I'll show you. Number 7, we'll do a quiz. And 8, some writing practice.
I think you know now that I like to start the lesson with a quick quiz. So I'm going to give you 3 sentences. I want you to think which one is simple, which one is compound, and which one is complex. We already talked about simple and compound, so that should be easy. And then obviously the other one is complex. So have a look. What do you think?
Which sentence is simple? It only has one independent clause. So, number 2. Number 2 only has one independent clause. It has a compound predicate. Which sentence is a compound sentence? This one has 2 independent clauses, so of course it's number 3. The other one, number 1, obviously is a complex sentence. This one, it has one independent clause and one dependent clause. And it's time to look at the different sentence types in more detail. So here is an overview of the different sentence types that we look at in this course. You can see simple, compound, and complex. It's very important you understand the different structures. Simple sentences we looked at in lesson 1 and lesson 2. You can see it has one independent clause. So just a subject and a predicate. If you forget about simple sentences, I recommend you look at lesson 1 and lesson 2 again. Compound sentences we looked at in lesson 2 and lesson 3. You can see a compound sentence has at least 2 independent clauses. Subject, predicate, comma, conjunction, subject, predicate. If you forget about compound sentences, go back to lesson 2 and lesson 3. And finally, complex sentences. So we looked at complex sentences very briefly in lesson 1. But in this lesson, we're going to really look at them and understand the structure. So you can see here that the structure is a little bit different because there's at least one independent clause and one dependent clause. We will talk about this soon. And you can see that there are actually 2 possible ways to write complex sentences. One way, you have the conjunction in the middle. The other way, you have the conjunction at the beginning. But I think we should look at this in more detail now. Let's look at the example from before. I have a coffee when I wake up. Now here in green, we have an independent clause. And in red, we have the dependent clause. Why do we say independent dependent? Well, the dependent clause needs the independent clause. So if I say, when I wake up, this is not finished. This sentence doesn't make sense because it needs another clause. It needs an independent clause. If I say, I have a coffee, it makes sense. It's okay. I have a coffee. No problem. This is correct English and it's a full, complete idea. But when I wake up is not a complete idea. So now if we put I have a coffee and when I wake up together, now we have a complex sentence. This is a complex sentence, and the cool thing is we can actually change the order of the clauses. So here you can see the dependent clause is first. We have the conjunction, and then we have a comma after the dependent clause. So remember, when you have the dependent clause first, you should use a comma. Now, do you remember the conjunctions or the connectors that we use in compound sentences? These ones are coordinating conjunctions. We learnt the fanboys, for and nor, but, or, yet, so. Do you remember that? Well, those are the conjunctions we use for compound sentences, but now you need to start learning the conjunctions or the connectors for complex sentences. And these are called subordinating conjunctions. I'm going to give you an introduction to subordinating conjunctions because they're very important. First, I'm going to tell you 4 things you need to know about subordinating conjunctions. 1, they are connectors, okay? Very important. They are connectors. 2, subordinating conjunctions are used to connect ideas or clauses in complex sentences. Okay, not compound, complex. 3, subordinating conjunctions introduce the dependent clause. We also call this the subordinate clause. They are not used to introduce the independent clause. And we also call this the main clause. Number 4, you need to learn many of them if you want to make your writing more interesting, connected, and complex. And that's why you are doing this course.
Before. I think you understand the meaning of before, but sometimes English learners put before with the wrong clause. Here is a highlighter. I need to use the highlighter. What do I need to do before I use the highlighter? I need to take off the lid. So before I use the highlighter, comma, I need to take off the lid. Or I can say, I need to take off the lid before I use the highlighter. The second one, you can see there's no comma. After. Again, I think you know the meaning of after, but in complex sentences, English learners sometimes mix the clauses. Here's the highlighter again. When can I use the highlighter? After I take off the lid. After I take off the lid, comma, I can use the highlighter. I can use the highlighter after I take off the lid. You can see in the second one, there is no comma. The subordinating conjunction after is in the middle.
So before and after are time subordinating conjunctions because they are related to time. We use before and after in a complex sentence to show one event or action is first and the other one is second. In a complex sentence, the after clause shows the first event, the before clause shows the second event. Take off the lid is the first event, use the highlighter is the second event. Here, we need to put after with take off the lid, right? Because that's the first event. So after I take off the lid, and then the independent clause is I can use the highlighter. But before we connect with I use the highlighter, because that's the second event. And the independent clause is I need to take off the lid. It's your turn. I will show you the subordinating conjunction and the subordinate clause or the dependent clause. I want you to finish the complex sentence with your own idea, okay? So you need to think of the independent clause. After I wake up, how can you finish this sentence? What do you do after you wake up? I take a shower. That's me. What about you? So first is wake up. Second, take a shower. Let's look at another one. Before I go to work, what do you do before you go to work? Or maybe go to university or go to school. What do you do? I have breakfast. That's me. Let's look at two more time subordinating conjunctions. When and as soon as. What is the difference in meaning between these two sentences? One, when Tom gets home, he watches TV. Two, as soon as John gets home, he watches TV. Who gets home and then watches TV immediately or instantly? John does, because as soon as. Which sentence shows more urgency? Number two, because of as soon as. As soon as is used to show that an action or event happens immediately after another. So like very quickly it happens. For example, as soon as I walked into the room, I tripped over. When is used to tell us at that time something happens, or something happened, or something will happen. The dependent clause tells us the time, and the independent clause tells us what happens. For example, when I saw Mark, I said hello. So I saw Mark, and at that time, I said hello. So that means I saw Mark, I guess, first, and then I said hello. But the emphasis is at that time. If both clauses are in the present simple, it can be useful to show a habit. For example, when I vacuum the floor, I sing. Do you know vacuum?
Oh yeah, tell you something, I think you understand. Tell you something, I wanna hold your hand, hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. We have talked about before, after, when, as soon as. Not too difficult, right? But there's something different, strange, unique about these subordinating conjunctions. When we use them to make dependent clauses or subordinate clauses, and we want to talk about the future, actually we use the present tense. So we could use present simple. This is really important to know because many English learners, when they use these subordinating conjunctions and talk about the future, they use the future tense. But actually, only the main clause or the independent clause should be in a future tense. For example, when I arrive, I will call you. Before I arrive, I will call you. As soon as I arrive, I will call you. You can see all of these, the subordinate clause, dependent clause, is in the present tense, and the main clause is in the future tense, will. But both clauses are talking about the future. This is important for you to remember because many of my students, from my experience, make this mistake. Many students say, when I will arrive, I will call you. And this is wrong. When I arrive, I will call you. Okay, please remember this.